This is my first Devops days. Is it anyone else's first Devops days? Welcome. Thank you for having me. It's also my first time in Denver. I look forward to sampling the local wares and beers later. Oh, there's a cable. Do you want me to plug it and do it again? We're turning it off and on again, everyone. Yes. All right. Now that we have slides, welcome to Tall Poppy Syndrome, which is how to succeed in tech without being cut down. I still have my privacy screen on. And so I am from AWS, but I need to tell you all now, this is not an AWS talk. Any views expressed on my own do not affect those of my employers, past, present, or future. But so I am from Australia, which is why I say things like data and aluminium. And I'm a long way from home, so I moved from Brisbane to New York City in July of last year for this job at AWS. And I don't have slides again. That's totally fine. We've got a slide, all right. And so one of the things that I noticed when I moved here, when I was out in my tech community at tech events or with my other community at dive bars in New York, I realized that the same sort of thing was happening to everyone, which was tall poppy syndrome. It's just the word is very common in Australia and New Zealand and Canada even, but it's really not that common in the US. So I'm going to teach you a lot of Australian words today. And first of all, we're going to do some audience participation. So there's going to be some options here on screen. Before you recoil, it's fine. You just point. I'm going to teach you an Australian word, and you point to which side of the screen that you think the correct definition is. So esky. Is an esky a small handheld fan used in the outback for... Which side is it? This side, handheld fan in the outback, or this side for a portable insulated container? Votes now, please. Yeah, it's a portable insulated container, like a Yeti cooler, I think would be the same thing as an esky. Larrikin. Is a larrikin a mischievous but endearing person, or is it a small Australian marsupial? It's a mischievous but endearing person. Yeah, no, go to town. Everything's fine. The next one is a mozzie, which one of the options is mosquito, and the other option is a children's game played with a ball. And if I'm looking at the screen right, I think mosquito is this side, and this is a children's game played with the ball. Which one is it, everyone? Congratulations if you guessed mosquito. Oh, I do not want to set up keyboard assistant. Ooh. Next one, sticky beak. Is a sticky beak a short, squat bottle of beer, or is it a nosy or overly curious person? It's a nosy or overly curious person, everyone, but beer is a good choice, though. It is Australia-themed. Next one, a wanker. Is that someone who... Okay, this is a swear, but it's not like... It's a low-level swear, number one. Number two, it's relevant. It's a relevant swear. We're allowing it as a treat. It's after lunch. It's fine. Is it someone who is self-absorbed, obnoxious, or pretentious? Or is it a unique type of tree known for its twisted branches? Votes now, please. Yeah, it's someone who's self-absorbed, obnoxious, or pretentious. So you're noticing that this is a theme, though, because Australians don't like that. And that's really also at the crux of what tall poppy syndrome is. And there becomes this overarching feeling that is everyone that's doing well just a bad person? Or is it bad to be showy and doing well? And it's one of those things that really pops up again and again in Australian culture. I'm also from regional Australia. I grew up on the Great Barrier Reef. If you saw from the map, that's where that is. And so this was a big part of what it was like growing up. I didn't even know anyone who worked in an office really growing up. My mom's a teacher. My dad's a telephone technician. So working in AI especially was very foreign to that, and especially in the town that I grew up in. So the Macquarie Dictionary is like the Australian dictionary, and they have a really nice definition of tall poppy syndrome. So it's someone who's preeminent in their field and a person with great status, but Australians in general have a bit of a negative view of tall poppies, especially if they seem to get above themselves. So this notion of getting above themselves or getting beyond where they should be or just not staying in their lane, that's the really bad part of it. So when this happens, they need to be cut down to size. So think of a field of poppies, and you're just trimming one off that's growing up above the others. So instead of having poppies that are as tall as they want to be, you have poppies that are all the one size, even if that means that some are cut off. So that's really what tall poppy syndrome is. So a desire to diminish the stature of those people who have attained excellence. Another alternative definition from the worldly scholar Taylor Allison Swift in 2010, people throw rocks at things that shine. I warned you all that there was going to be a Taylor Swift reference in this yesterday on Twitter. You should follow me on Twitter. But this really is the crux of tall poppy syndrome. People see something nice, they see someone trying and wanting to do well, and instead of saying, round of applause, that's really cool for them, they're like, oh, I can't wait to see when they ruin this. Or someone's just gotten funding for their startup, and they're like, I can't wait till all their investors lose their money or something. So it's just like this notion again and again. These are from New Zealand universities, so when people's conspicuous success elevates or distinguishes them, others can be envious that they have to cut them down to size. This notion of conspicuous success. I'm a senior developer advocate. A lot of DevRel as a job is conspicuous success. Anytime you're speaking at a tech event, that is conspicuous success. So we're ending with this situation where, like, if you're doing good at your job, people are mad at you for this, even though that is completely illogical and makes absolutely no sense. So what does this look like in tech? Well, first, that's a mechanical keyboard that it's using. I'm very proud of this imagery. There's a gaming headset. So in tech, it can look like colleagues trash-talking someone for learning a new language, Rust. Someone's really excited that they've learned Rust. They're really excited about joining the community. The Rust community is incredibly wholesome. The first thing that I did when I started learning Rust was tell everyone that I started learning Rust, and I think that's how you know you've done the hello world of it. But then instead, maybe people start trash-talking someone for doing that. Maybe they're not excited that they're doing a new thing. When we saw in, I think it was Nora's talk earlier today, someone said, oh, we've got this new topic, let's try using it. Maybe they had to do a lot of research before they decided to do that, and what if they had been cut down before they even realized that that was a new service or technology they could be using? Another one, colleagues trash-talking someone for getting a tech certificate. Hands up if this has happened to you. My hand is raised, maybe the only one. But instead of being excited that they went to do the certificate, instead of being proud that they brought that to the company, especially if you're working in a partner organization, it's super helpful. People will just be mad that you went out of your way to do this and post on LinkedIn about it. This gets me. Colleagues undermining the success of someone going for a promotion while also not going for the promotion themselves. It's like, my boyfriend has 2 cats, and one of them, there's this toy and it like explodes and they sort of like murder it, the Velcro comes off, they love it. The other one doesn't know how to do that, but it just sits on it. And he doesn't know what the toy is, but he knows he does not want his sister to have it. And this is what reminded me of this point. So someone knows that like they don't feel confident enough to go for a promotion themselves from maybe staff to senior, but they know that they do not want their colleague to get it. So they'll do anything in their power not to better themselves so that they may get that promotion in future, but they just want to make sure that someone doesn't get it. So they'll start saying, oh yeah, they're really not good at this, or look at all the mistakes that they made in the last year, instead of saying, hey, can I help you interview for this? Hey, how did you get all this success? Can I learn anything from you? This notion of just like, you just don't want someone else to have it because it's nice. Additionally, getting weird when someone graduates from intern to junior, or staff to senior, or senior to principal, or something about that. Instead of just being universally excited for them, this weird comparisons will start, saying, oh, why did they get promoted to principal when I didn't? None of this is bettering the work that you're doing as a company. It's not helping the product succeed. It's not helping you to recruit more people. Colleagues trash-talking someone for doing their first conference talk, or trying to block them from speaking altogether. This is incredibly common. I wish it wasn't. It's happened to me. It's happened to so many other people. Instead of just saying, I'd love to help you do a CFP, or I'm talking at the next conference, do you want to do a joint talk? We can do it together, or can we get you on a panel so it's easier for you? Instead of just making it easier, just trying to block them from some weird technicality why they shouldn't be doing the talk, or just trying to make sure they don't do it altogether, which leads me to corporate negging. People can pretend that they haven't read the game, but the reality is that all the people who read the game, which for those who somehow luckily have not seen this is a pickup artist book, that doesn't stop in bars negging. What happened is all those people got jobs, and they bring that wonderful skill with them to work. And so negging is when you're trying to whittle down someone's self-confidence just to exert power over them. So like, I think one of the examples in the game is like, offering a woman a mint after you've spoken to them to then say that their breath smells or something, but like, there are people that do many variations of this in any corporate context, but when this gets into like, especially tech culture, it goes way beyond backhanded compliments, and it really is trying to just like, chip by chip undermine their self-confidence and their ability to deliver the product as part of a team, which especially when you're working at a product-driven company is really bad because you're just assuming you'll get a worse situation for your users. Not good. Or if you're working for maybe a consultancy or something very customer-obsessed, at the end of the day, your goal should be making things better for customers. That's not really part of just like negging your coworkers to the best of your ability. And this also comes across with resistance to change or new ideas. If people don't like someone that's gone out to learn something new, they are absolutely not going to like also having to do that. So that just becomes this overarching resistance to, I don't want to have to do this, you can't make me do this, everyone's making me do this, why? It's not a good idea anyway, they don't know how to code. So the big parts of this is overall in tech, it gives you really decreased morale. It's not nice working with people like this is not news. It also gives you really increased stress levels because instead of thinking about how can I do the best job at my work, you're managing all the other politics that go around with this. So like, how can I do a really good job in my role without making it look like I'm doing a good job? How can I keep everyone happy instead of just thinking about the thing that you are hired to do then? And the other part of this, all of this rolls up in reduced team productivity. If you're not thinking about what you're building because you're doing all these other side quests, you're just not going to be as productive, and it's especially bad when those side quests are also fundamentally negative. Another award to myself for the stock photo on this one. But imposter syndrome gets talked about a lot in tech, which is important, but imposter syndrome and tall poppy syndrome are very different things. And one of the ways that it's like it almost becomes corporate negging when someone's like, oh no, it's not tall poppy syndrome, it's imposter syndrome, when they are then trying to tell someone that they don't know what they're doing, like, but trying to make them internalize it themselves. It's very weird. When you spot this, you'll think of this talk. It's very weird and very weird to explain, but you're going to experience this in the wild, and you will remember what it is. But the fundamental difference is that tall poppy syndrome is really external. So other people are undermining your success and your accomplishments, whereas imposter syndrome, the call is from inside the house. So doubting your own success and accomplishments. They are different things. Both of them not ideal at work. Both of them will not help you to do your job. Both of them can be helped. Positive. But thinking about making sure that they are very different. If either of these are rampant in your workplace, it's not going to help you to do what you're there to do, but they are very different in how you as a person can deal with both of those. Because dealing with imposter syndrome on yourself is a lot easier to do because it calls from inside the house. You at least know who to talk to fix it. Tall poppy syndrome is external, but it does affect everyone internally as well. So it can be a little bit more tricky if you're not actively monitoring for something like this, or yeah, I could make an observability joke. But the other thing that it gets confused with, I really was on a roll when I made these slides, is arrogance. Because the notion of saying, oh, they just think it's tall poppy syndrome because they think they are the best programmer to ever walk the earth. And it's not that, right? Like, there's a very different thing between arrogance and not wanting anyone else to do well and just being very self-centered compared to, there's a very big difference to that and tall poppy syndrome. They can be fixed though. So if you want to avoid arrogance, build your self-awareness and your self-confidence. When you are being arrogant, you will then realize that. Additionally, when people are doing tall poppy syndrome to you, you'll realize it. And additionally, when people are succeeding and you don't want them to succeed because you are tall poppying them, you'll start to realize that as well. Because we all do this. Like there are people who maybe went to a very fancy school and have a lot of generational wealth and then did a wonderful family and friends round for their startup. And I cannot help but be bitter about that. And I'm working very hard on it, but that's not where I came from. And so it's one of those things that I fully notice that I'm doing this now. I'm actively trying to stop, but I'm at least self-aware about it. And being honest with yourself and saying, oh yeah, I totally do this because everyone does, then you can start to help yourself in avoiding doing that. And it's that step of being vulnerable with yourself, working out that you're doing it, and then on that side as well. And then having the self-confidence to actually act on that. It's hard when you realize you're being a jerk and you're not doing anything about it. So you really need to be confident within yourself to move past this. And then you also need the self-confidence to say things like, I'm grateful for the opportunity to. So you're thankful for that because you have to be really humble in what you're doing. So expressing gratitude in meetings can be really weird. Someone had a good awkward gif earlier in the talk. But when things are getting weird, having the confidence to say what you need to say to get through this. Another really good example of this, I couldn't have achieved this without the support of blah, 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 blah. Having the time to like stop and take stock and acknowledge everyone who has helped you along this, whether that's in like an incident report that people were helping you with or in any sort of other meeting, having the confidence to call people into that conversation and make sure their voice is checked off will stop you from looking like this like peak person because you're rarely on your own. And even if you were, someone probably took other things off your plate so you could do the thing that you were there being congratulated for. So having the confidence to bring all of that up is really important. And the other thing is to leave the ladder down for other people. This is something that, like it was when women first started being allowed to have jobs, some women went through and it was like the idea of the ladder was slippery so they couldn't climb the ladder. And then what happened is some women got to the top and then they just cut the ladder off so no one else could come up with them because they're like, well, it was terrible. There was a spot for one woman, right, at the top. So if they had anyone else there, it was going to bode terribly for them. So the idea instead of saying, no, we're going to leave the ladder down for other people. How can you make this as easy as possible for other people? CFPs are a really good example for this. A CFP is a call for proposal. It's what you submit to do a talk, for example, at Devops Days Rockies. You should all apply next year. But knowing how to write a CFP is a really weird skill because it's totally separate to actually delivering the talk. You have to be able to write this thing that no one actually shows you how to do. I have a whole like hour-long conference talk on that I will dig up and link on my Twitter. But making sure that you're then saying, how can I help everyone else at my company to do the same? If you're studying for an AWS certificate, great idea. Instead of just doing that on your own, do you want to have a study group that you're inviting everyone else to? How can you make it easy for other people? Additionally, a really good example of this is if someone's really good at their job, but they're just terrible at talking in meetings, have a pre-meeting with them and figure out how you can have a game plan. So I'll say, okay, what do you actually need to bring up today? And they're like, oh, I did these 2 cool projects. Fantastic. I'm going to say, Rebecca, weren't you working on something like blah, blah, blah? And then Rebecca can come in and say, oh yeah, I totally did this and blah, 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 blah. And then being able to ask probing questions like you would in an interview to help them say what they needed to say, that will give them the confidence to do what you probably did to get yourself in that position. And it's just about leaving the ladder down for everyone else so that they can come up after you instead of cutting it off. Another famed scholar, Kendrick Lamar, said, be humble. And this is a big part of this as well. So when you're looking at tackling tall poppy syndrome, also this whole slide is going to be the most water is wet slide ever. All of these are things that workplaces should be doing. And it's one of those things that you should be doing these anyway, but also just being on the lookout for tall poppy syndrome is really important. So the first one is creating a workplace culture where everyone's wins are celebrated. This means giving everyone the opportunity to talk about what they're doing. If you don't have a culture that's like good at communication or someone decided they didn't like meetings so no one talks to anyone ever, but then that wasn't replaced with other communication, don't do that. Instead, if there's like a way that people can do a self-shout out, do you have like the opposite of a suggestion box where people can say something they're excited with? Do they have to congratulate someone else for something constantly? At one company I worked at, I even for reasons that I don't understand, they let me in charge of the digital signage in the company, which as you've seen with my slides was probably not the best idea. But I really just used that as an opportunity. I would congratulate anyone for anything at any time. Someone bought a new car because they got a promotion. I was like, yes, you're getting a slide. Send me a photo of you excited with your car. Or just someone did a talk, they were really excited. Congratulations, you're getting a slide. And this would be broadcast to like all of the locations. So it really brought people in so that when we were together at maybe like the Christmas party or something else, someone was saying, fantastic, wasn't it you that got a new Doberman puppy? Congratulations. And I'm like, yes. Did I do this because I wanted to look at dog pictures on company time? Yes. But it was very helpful because it made people come to me when they had something that they wanted to be congratulated for. And it's just maybe we weren't really meeting as a company altogether, but that didn't matter because we were still having this constant communication. And you had a reason instead of just saying, hi, how was your weekend on Slack? You've got something to like follow up with them with. So making sure that there's a culture in which you're actually celebrating those wins. Especially important if some companies, the only wins that ever get really celebrated are from like one team. So maybe there's a big sales gong, which I love that, that works really well. But then what do you have in your team that's the equivalent? Like what can you make as a manager, or even if you're not a manager, you can be a leader without being a manager. So what can you make for your team that will give people that little opportunity to be validated that is the sales gong for your team? Another one, Water is wet. Encourage inclusivity so that everyone is encouraged to share wins, because it's not fair if only one team gets to do this, or maybe one type of person, or someone from one kind of background, or someone with one kind of college degree. It really does need to be everyone in together for this to work across the board. Because if it's not working across the board, it's just like probably not working at all, really. Leaders need to set the example, which water is wet. If leaders are not participating in this, it will be really bad. And you've all, I'm sure, sat through like all hands meetings when the CEO gets up and says that they are a genius, and ignoring the fact that everyone else helped them alongside doing this. So making sure that at any opportunity you're helping leaders to realize who they could be thanking for this, or if they forget to thank someone, jump on in there with the, Rebecca, wasn't this something you were working on? I saw you doing something really interesting to solve this problem. Being able to jump in with those things if they're not setting the example, or having a really like off the record in a way that it will not harm their ego after the meeting, saying like, hey, it was really good that you told me you're a genius in the all hands, but have you considered that there were a lot of people who put work into this, there were a lot of people who are on call at night doing this, really being able to thank them. Can I help you to find all the people that did this so you can thank them? Like we could put all their faces on a slide, it would be cool to do that, and they'll be like, yeah, sure, absolutely. Giving them those little positive nudges will really help to change culture overall, especially if you can show them something that's going to be really easy to do. Maybe they didn't know they could jump into Slack channels and congratulate people as an entire Slack channel that's not an all hands meeting. Maybe they didn't know they could do that. Maybe you could show them how. Maybe you can set up like a Slack bot that sends them something, something that will automate it in some ways so that it's taking the load off, but then they can still be an effective leader. All of those things will really just wrap up into what they're doing. Will I go to the next one? Yes. And so overall, just encouraging communication, learning, and knowledge sharing. If someone learns something, is there an opportunity for them to share that with everyone? Lunch and learns are a thing for a reason, because it's a really good time to just say, here's what I'm working on, here's a show and tell. Or if someone's getting a certification, can you work with them? Lots of people who are in sort of like staff, senior, mid-level management, lots of people did not do the original AWS certifications, for example. But I encourage everyone to do Cloud Practitioner, because then if they're doing that with a team, first of all, it's really good to learn alongside juniors. Then second of all, you'll get to know what they know, because it's really hard. You don't know the ceiling of information in these exams until you do them. And I found that really helpful when I did Cloud Practitioner, because then when I was with a lot of people who were just doing it, I knew how to speak in the language that they were using, and I also knew what was a step beyond that certification, so they may not have found it yet. But then I could also relate it back to something that they did know. So learning as a group is really good, because learning is good, but also getting a really clear understanding of where everyone's at will help you to communicate with them really effectively, which is what you're trying to get at all together. Additionally, the knowledge sharing thing. So if you've done something great, but you know you really understand a topic, when you can teach that to someone else. So instilling this will not only improve your docs and your overall processes, but how can you share knowledge better in your organization to reduce your tech debt is something that I think would come up at every single DevOps Days event. And the overall point of this as well, you need to find the confidence within yourself to say, I really love that animation, don't cut me off. I think about this all the time, and it was something that I just, like this plagued me when I was younger, and I hated being cut off because I knew that people didn't want me to do something that I was fine doing, completely qualified to do. And the reason they didn't want it was just they wanted to sit on the cat toy, so the other cat couldn't have it. They had no constructive reason for it. It was fantastic for the business and made them a lot of money, but they wanted to say that I couldn't do it for whatever reason. So if you take nothing else from this talk, have the power within yourself to say, don't cut me off. And then also if you're managing people and they're getting cut off by you or anyone else in your team, make sure that they know that this has a name, because it's one of those things like, if you have a weird condition or disease, does it help you to know the name of it? Not really, you're still sick, but it at least gives you an idea of what you can do to manage it, or it gives you some like sense of understanding what's happening so you can work through it, or at least having a name to put on it stops it being this like weird overarching feeling and you've got a label to put on it. And I know people do not like labels, but this one is a very helpful one. So now I'm going to open it up to questions on tall poppy syndrome. I did leave like 5 minutes for this because I thought there may be some questions. If no one is brave enough, I'll start making them up, but hopefully we have some questions. Is anyone brave? We have a brave person, all right.
So on the topic of stopping people from doing things,
yeah.
Engineering, leadership, management, we have a responsibility to the business as well.
Yeah.
Do you need me to get it? Okay, farther in there. So we have a responsibility to the business as well. How do we balance the responsibility to the business with not just cutting off people? For example, AWS does not have a GA Rust SDK to use, and so you...
Please talk to me about this after. Very excited. I love Rust chats. Yes, no. It's one of those things that's also... It comes back to people saying, I want to make a data-driven decision when they do not have all the data. Like in one of the talks today, they were saying all your metrics are wrong and you shouldn't make a decision based on this. And this is a really good example as well, because especially with software development engineers, any sort of similar role, having to hire a new person for that role is incredibly expensive. Opportunity cost in time, but there's also opportunity cost of losing that staff member altogether, or there's opportunity cost in them not being progressed along if you're missing out on future value of them. So all of these things, like when we're looking, if I go back to these, all of these are things that workplaces should do. So all of these, there's like, I hate being like the one that's saying like studies show it makes your business better, but like all of these studies show, Harvard Business Review stuff, that like this is how to do business. And it's just about being able to then be honest with your team and say, even if you're honest enough to say, look, I think this is important, however, we need to weigh this up against these other pieces. You would like to strive for this. Are you going to make a business decision trade-off on this? Can you document why this is going to be a good use of your time? Giving them to say, like, instead of you having to be the one to make that decision, yes or no, put the power back on them. It's like when people say, oh, I want to go to this conference. Devops Rockies. And then they're like, oh, saying, why do you need to go? And then just because reasons. Like, that's not very like powerful of them. They haven't had to do anything to do that. They haven't had to prove themselves in any way. So instead saying like, okay, great, show me this, why this is important. That will improve their value to the business so much, you know, if they're able to then put that back in a business context to do their job anyway. Any other brave questions? There's one at the back. Would you like to go for a small jog? He's got 2 hands up. Clap for the jog. Yes. For those watching at home, it was quite great, a jog. All right? I can't see you, but yes.
So how to be constructive critic then, and how to recognize when you're being constructive?
Can you say that again? Was it asking about constructive criticism?
Yeah, so how to be constructive critic then, and
right.
How to recognize when you're not being constructive?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So being able to think about when you're being self-aware and understanding when you may be being a jerk to someone else, also think about if people have given criticism to you that you don't fundamentally agree with or that you don't think aligns with the values, think about specifically why that's the case. Not everything in life is a decision tree, but a lot of things are. So think about, if I say this, this will happen, or these are the options I have, what's going to be the best pathway through it. Think about, are you doing something that's going to degrade them as a person? Are you saying their feelings are bad? Are you saying their feelings are invalid? Are you just saying they're not good at their job? Those things maybe won't help because you're not really helping them to get to an outcome. But when you look at this list especially, being able to go for knowledge sharing. So maybe someone's just really bad at open and effective communication. Is there something you can do as a whole organization, getting everyone in and just understanding how to communicate better with each other? And then from the leadership side, if you see people communicating poorly, how can you then make sure that the standard stays up for everyone in the same way you would for like, if your test cases were failing, you wouldn't just like push it anyway. So being able to say, what is the standard that we accept and how can we best document what we're doing to do this? So are there examples of things that you would not accept as criticism, but are there examples of tough criticism and this is how to handle that? If you as like a manager or a leader are not giving everyone that opportunity, it's not going to be good. But also you as a manager or a leader or even an individual contributor should be able to say, this is the workplace that I would like to work in, and then take ownership of what you think should and shouldn't happen there. So constructive criticism is hard, but you only get better at it by being really honest with yourself when you're giving that communication, and then being honest with yourself when you're receiving it to make sure that there's this, like the notion of DevOps and like CI/CD, are you constantly improving what you're doing when you're like talking to people at work? It is a big part of what work is. I know we don't like it, myself included, but being able to do that better will pay dividends across your career. Any other brave questions? Do we have any other questions? All right.
Not a question so much as a minimum viable change in implementation of implementing this culture where wins are celebrated that I've seen at several organizations now. is to just have a Slack channel for thanks or kudos, and that way it's wide open. Anybody can thank anybody or give a kudos to anybody else for any small win that they've celebrated.
I would challenge that and say you should do that in the regular channel. Because it's like having a separate thing for it. I love a thanks channel, I love a shout out. But doing that in the regular channel brings it back to regular business, because then it's not like a weird third thing in people's brains. So instead thinking of like, this is the regular channel where we're going to be talking about all sorts of decisions that are being made. And it makes it more important when people get that praise and feedback if it's just in the regular thing. It doesn't need to be off somewhere where people can mute the channel, because they will do that. So instead having it so you're just saying this is important to how we communicate, we would like wholesome content, is great as a move overall. Any other brave questions?
All right.
All right, follow me on a social platform of your choice. I also make cloud-themed TikToks if that's relevant to your interests.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.